to understand the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration.
Hello, Mr. Josh Terry. Good to be here with you.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for accepting the invitation. You and I vaguely connected years ago through some shared circles of coaching and learning, and then we drifted apart. And I just started seeing your content pop up over the years, and especially on Instagram, I've seen a lot of short form videos pop up where you describe sort of various mental models and ways of understanding life and a variety of things about uh, being an effective person in very clear and concise terms. So I'm going to ask you all kinds of questions about how you do that and how you think. Um, but go ahead and let listeners know who you are and what it is that you do.
Yeah, thank you. I enjoyed our past running into each other, and I'm glad we're running into each other again. Uh, my name is Josh Terry, and I'm a high performance coach that helps people overcome burnout and overwhelm.
Okay. So, Josh, I've heard a couple of conversations with you, and I've read a little bit of your writing, seen lots of those short posts, and it seems like a lot of your work comes down to some pretty simple terms of basically bringing things into mental clarity through certain models uh, to then overcome those problems as you described. So, burnout, and there was another word that you used there,
Overwhelm. Yeah,
overwhelm.
yeah. It's so the principles that I am a nerd about can be applied to almost anything. And so as a coach, it's more about just picking something and going, okay, well, what am I going to help people with? As these are universal principles that can increase a person's performance across every single domain that a human performs in. And so I chose burnout and overwhelm as I think it's a really relevant topic these days. It's very important. But fundamentally, I'm a student of learning theory and uh, human development and polarity. And so I like looking at the world and figuring out what needs to be done to achieve some form of balance, or maybe not achieve it, but create more of it in a moment. And then what are the fundamental steps required to get there? And you can think of balance as simply the way you might balance on a bicycle, right? It doesn't have to be some complex spiritual topic. It's you want to be moving in a direction. Almost everyone wants to be moving in a direction in some way in life. And when you are out of balance, you feel like you are not on that bicycle, or you are on a very wobbling bicycle, right? Your diet is off, your health is off, your mindset is off. You are overwhelmed with all the things that you have to do in a day. You have been doing too many things, so you're burning out. And so something is stopping you from riding smoothly on the path into the direction that you want to go. Your bicycle is wobbling. You are out of balance. And so, figuring out what would put you back into balance, and I like to look through the lens of order and chaos, polarity, to find those answers. You know, what elements of order do you need to achieve balance, and what elements of chaos? That's my favorite lens. And then once you know that, and sometimes they come in the opposite order, but once you know that, then what are the steps required to get there? And that's the fundamentals of human progress, learning theory. What are the steps that a person needs to take in order to develop to a direction that they want to go. So those are my obsessions, and they apply universally. And I help people with burnout and overwhelm.
So, how did you discover, in sort of applying these deep universal principles to helping people, uh, achieve their goals or become more effective, and specifically overcome overwhelm and burnout? Is it through working with people for quite some time that you narrowed it in that way and understood that's essentially what you're really helping people with?
Yeah, so part of it was because of being wildly curious and it being my personal interest. Part of it was through burning out and being a workaholic at a young age. Part of it was through starting college when I was 15 and becoming a student of how to learn from a very young age. And part of it was from consistently showing up as the guide in a lot of my relationships with friends, just people that I worked with. I just consistently ended up being in a teacher role or a tutor role, or a coaching role, and it just built over time until it just became me. This is just how I seem to operate.
Well, I'd like to get practical with you and kind of give some value to various kinds of listeners. But I'd also like to get sort of personal and ask you about the development of Josh Terry. You mentioned going to college at 15, and you and I share a background in that we were both homeschooled earlier on.
Hmm.
So could you talk a little bit about early, so maybe your earliest memories of learning and creativity and interest, and then homeschooling and how that affected your outlook on life and learning?
Yeah, my childhood was a kind of interesting one. It was a balance of really solid structure and total non-structure, which might have been part of what fueled my interest in that direction. But the structure was I grew up in a very conservative family, both politically and religiously. And my parents cared very much about us uh, being educated well. And so my mom sought to teach us from a very early age, things that just aren't commonly taught anymore. Things like Latin. She, did her best to give us, some structured background in, like, things that are very fundamental to our existence now, right? Latin is a language that is the basis for how very large portion of the languages on Earth today. And so um, we got a lot of foundational teaching like that, and then also, we were homeschooled and mom was busy and she wanted us to get out of the house.
Mhm.
And so there was also a lot of time that was just totally unsupervised, where I was out playing in the woods, or playing at the beach or playing in the islands, from a very early age. I was the youngest of three boys. And so the my brothers would take me with them on adventures. And so I got adventure pretty early as a child in terms of outdoor stuff.
Yeah.
And so I would spend, it's just an extraordinary amount of time outdoors, uh, compared to most people, and far less time in school, and still I would be testing far above average. And I think a lot of it was because of just uh, the elements of what nature can teach you. A lot of what a kid needs to know can be learned, picking up rocks and throwing them at the water, and learning how the water moves, and climbing a tree and falling down and figuring out how gravity works. A lot of that stuff is very informative. And so I had a very interesting dichotomy of some very structured stuff and some very unstructured stuff. And that continued with what I ended up studying myself, which was music. I got a violin at the age of 9, and I took violin lessons throughout most of my childhood. And it became quite a passion of mine, so much so that when I went to college at 15, I started studying lessons in college and decided I wanted to be a rock star and major in music by the time I was 16.
Okay. Wow. And what about becoming more explicitly interested in learning theory? How did that sort of come about?
Yeah, so when I was a kid, I was just hyper curious, right? So I just learn about, you're gonna show me what gardening looks like. Okay, now give me 5 magazines about gardening. I want to learn all that there is to know about gardening. I built a fish pond in the yard when I was a kid, like a 2,000 gallon fish pond, and I studied martial arts and wood carving, all sorts of stuff. And so I had this tendency to want to pick up lots of different things. So there was some element of what's the universal concept that is picking things up from a pretty early age. And then I went to college, and college was hard because I was 15 years old. And so I started to ask myself the question, how do I get A's? And the question, how do I get A's, is actually a very different question from how do I get an A, right? So how do I get an A is what is required of me in order to pass this course. And how do I get A's is what makes you pass courses, right? They're very different things. And I started stacking on the subjects in the course matter pretty early in college. By the time I was 17, I was taking more than a full-time load for sure. And I just wanted to think in terms of like, okay, well, how do I make this work with everything? And that's the first piece actually that's really useful that I recommend to a lot of people is, can you switch your mindset from, what's the specific thing here for success versus what's the universal principle behind it? And if you start asking that question, you are going to start picking up elements of how to learn. But uh, the first thing that popped into my mind when I started asking this question to myself, how do I get A's, was find out what the professor wants, which is actually pretty useful. And then from there, it went to figure out what question to ask, which is interesting because like you'd think that you need to be asking the questions of um like what do you want me to do to pass this course? But almost every professor has sort of a secret desire of a question that they want their student to be asking them. That question that if you ask it, they go, yes, that was the point. That was the thing I was trying to get at. Now let me answer that question and you will have the meat and the potatoes of what I'm trying to get to you.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can figure out what question the teacher is trying to get you to ask, you get much closer to the core of, winning the game of courses. Now, the game of courses isn't exactly the game of learning, but it's getting there. But I started asking that question, and I started to, learn my material faster because that got me to focus in on the specific area where a professor wanted me to be learning, and so that helped me get better grades, help me, excel more. And this again is a great universal principle. Anytime you go into something that you're trying to learn, you can go, well, what is the core of the thing that I'm trying to learn? What is the definition of it? And that's actually the next thing that happened to me is I was studying algebra, and I really had trouble with math when I was young. And I was studying algebra, and I had a lot of trouble getting through the algebra courses in college. And I finally got to, I think it was geometry. And for the first time in my life inside of mathematics, I saw a definition. For some reason, all the professors previously had never defined what I was doing. I'd never gone into a algebra course, and I'll ask you, like, have you ever seen this? I never went to an algebra course and had a math professor get up and say, okay, so here is what algebra is. They always just started giving me problems and telling me to solve them and explaining how to solve the problems. But they didn't explain the meta principle of, like, what are these problems that we're solving? Like, what is this? Right? Like solving for a variable? That phrase right there, you could start and just have a class on solving for a variable and it'd be super helpful, right? You don't need to go into solving for variables. You've got to explain, like, what is this thing? And so I saw this definition of geometry, and all of a sudden I cracked geometry within a couple of days. Because I went, oh, we're just trying to do that? And this is something that I found is very common, is professors often spend their life inside of a topic, so much so that it's a given what the topic is. But a student actually spends very little time inside of the topic. And when they're put inside of a topic, it's sort of a culture shock to go in there and start working within the environment of that topic. And so a little bit of understanding of, hey, this is what we're actually doing, goes a long way, right? If you start a history class with going, well, in 1847, this happened. Make sure that you remember that for your next exam. The students go, what? But if you walk in and you say, okay, so we're going to try to recall a certain set of events so that we can understand a pattern between those events, so that we can then derive a lesson from it and understand what we might do in the future as a result of that lesson. Well, by golly, I might be a little bit more interested in remembering that date. Right? Because there's a purpose, there's a reason, there's meaning, there's an understanding, a definition of what we were doing. And so I started to value understanding core concepts as a result of that. And I'll get to one more after that, as this starts to get into actual principles. From there, I found myself, like, really trying to puzzle it out, where I was going, okay, there is this thing that people aren't talking about that is learning. People are just teaching me stuff, but they aren't actually talking about learning. There's no definition for what learning is. It was just a command to learn stuff. And my autistic mind was just so upset with that. Right? It's just like, but what am I doing? I don't know.
Yeah.
And I still to this day remember walking through the humanities hallway and it hitting me and going, oh, so I need to connect every fact I know to every other fact that I know. And then I need to apply every fact that I know. And then I will understand. And once I started getting that concept, I started taking off. Because learning is a process of differentiation and connection. In fact, you could say that education is the process of differentiation and enlightenment is the process of connection. Because when we learn, we need to identify something. We need to single it out as this is not like the others. And then we also need to connect it to go, this is how it is like the others. Right? This is how you learn everything. right? You come into the world, and somebody goes tree, right? And you see this object, this big hunk of wood, big old trunk, and a bunch of leaves on top, and they go tree, and you go, okay, tree. And then you look at another one that looks very different. This one was tall and spindly, this one's big and bushy, and they go tree. And you go, okay, well, that's very different, but also they both have leaves and they both have a trunk. Awesome. Okay. And then somebody really upsets the bucket and says oak tree. And then they go maple, and that's even worse because they didn't even use the word tree, and you're like, what? Right? And so one of these is like the others, and one of these is not like the others, right? These are the games that we play. And so that's our conception of it. But then also we need to recall it. And we recall it with repetition, which is essentially, at its most powerful version, application. Right? And so, if you pointed a tree on a page, it's going to be less impactful than if you pointed a tree in real life and then get the kid to put their
Right.
hand on the trunk. And this is experiential application of the word tree.
Yeah. This might.
And these two concepts extrapolate out through your entire life. These two things. And I'm just going to give one other example to like flesh this out before I leave it off, and we can take it wherever you want from here. But if you're a child and your dad is teaching you to mechanic for the first time, they can't start you with a wrench. They need to start you with something else, because a wrench has too little application to who you are. But if they start you with a hammer, it's going to make sense, because you've been hitting things with rocks your entire life. So the first thing that he does is he provides connection, right? He says, here's a hammer. You know how you've been hitting things all day long, Charlie? Try hitting things with this. And you pick it up and you go, ha, wow, this hits stuff way better, right? This is super useful. I can hit stuff all day long with this and it'll break, right? Awesome. So that's connection, where you understood that you can hit stuff. You know what hitting is. And so you hit stuff with hammer, and now you're applying it. And so you've made a connection, and you differentiated between the measly rocks that you were using and the epic hammer, right? So now your dad comes in and says, okay, Charlie, this hammer, it's called a tool.
Right.
Now here's a wrench. You've been seeing Daddy turn things, right? Hammers hit things. Wrenches turn things. They're both tools. And Charlie goes, oh, okay. Okay. So they're different, but they're also connected.
Mhm.
And your entire life of growth is just an extrapolation of those two things.
Very interesting. You got me thinking about a lot of things here, Josh. So, I mean, one thought is with the distinction between different trees, but which are yet still all trees, so the same. Um, it's sort of like even the distinction of how you would apply a formula that you can learn or some fact or piece of information to real life application. Like you said before, it's more like riding a bicycle, right? Like there's this lived in the moment present activity of, for example, speaking. Here I am trying to pose my next question, and so I could try to like look at a list of questions I've written down from before or topics, or um, try to take something specific that you said and just ask a question. But I'm sort of trying to go, um, what's it's a little abstract what I'm trying to get at here, but you got pretty abstract because you're talking about polarity of chaos and order. You're
Yeah, are you
talking,
trying to figure out, are you trying to make the connection of, like, I'm trying to figure out how connected this question should be? or how much we need to switch away from the question.
In a way, yeah, because it's
Yeah.
it's like the very thing called learning that you're talking about, um, is about, engagement with specific uh, things happening, where you make those real distinctions between things that are same and yet different. Um, so we might change the topic and talk about something else, and then we might discover, oh, we're still talking about learning, right?
Yes.
We've just now,
Yes. Perfect. Yeah,
yeah,
because well, a good podcast, for example, is a good conversation, and a good conversation usually has variety and continuity,
right,
right? And so, preferably in a conversation, we're gonna go over a variety of topics, but at some point within those topics, we're gonna go, "Oh, yeah, and that kinda relates to the thing that we were talking about before, cause X, Y, and Z."
yeah,
Right? And so, this is a thing, and, I love this. This is something I talk about is connected to, for example, music. Music requires pattern and breaking of pattern.
yeah,
These are the 2 things that you need in order to have good music. You need harmony and disharmony in order to create good music. And the interest of the music is the level to which there is a good balance between things going as you would predict and things not going as you would predict, right? And if everything is unpredictable, then we call it noise. And if everything is predictable, then we call it boring sounds. And if things are understandably expected, but a little bit surprising, then we call it music.
yeah, yeah. There's something comprehensible and meaningful there.
Yes.
It's very mysterious. I love the music metaphor. I'm not a musician myself, but deeply appreciative of music, and that's probably one of the best ways that you could make sense of this topic of how chaos and order interplay in a meaningful way, whereas either or is not so meaningful.
People get really tired of it making sense or not making sense. They
Yeah,
want it to do both.
yeah, yeah.
We want almost every aspect of our lives to both make sense and not make sense a little bit. And if we don't, we get upset. And this actually comes back to a concept that Tony Robbins talks about. He talks about the 6 human needs, and the first 2 are certainty and uncertainty. If your life is completely certain, then you will get bored to death. You'll go nuts.
Hmm.
If your life is completely uncertain, then you will freak out. You'll be Life will be so unpredictable that you will not be able to manage life. And so, in order to have a good life, 2 absolute necessities, actually not even to have a good life, just to not go crazy. You must have a life that contains a certain level of predictability and a certain level of unpredictability. They're both requirements, and if you make either one the solution, it'll ruin your life. And this ties to all sorts of other places. You'll notice a lot of people get obsessed with the single answer, and then a lot of other people get obsessed with, oh, well, there's no one answer, right?
Right. Yeah.
These 2 things will happen. There's one camp of people that are like, "Look, it's all this way," and all the people that are suffering are just suffering because they can't face up to the fact that it's all just this one way, and they need to learn how to accept, and life is hard. Usually that goes with this particular, life view. But, like, there's an acceptance of this is the way, and that's how you will fix your life. And then there's another camp that's like, look, it causes so much pain when people are so attached to the one single way, and there's so many other people, that have learned that there's different ways, and look, there's no one way, man. It's all so different. And these two camps fight, like every 50 years, one generation, one is called the hippies of the world, and then they flip to the other camp as the hippies of the world. But both camps suffer tremendously because you actually need a degree of it's one way in your life, and you need a degree of there's multiple ways. And if you obsess about always making it about multiple ways, look, there's no true facts. Look, everything's debatable. Look, it's like, truth is a social construct, right? These things, it'll wreck you, because your life will be in such anxiousness and disarray that you won't be able to organize anything. But then if you spend your life just going, it's this way, this is how it works. And when you go to learn a new topic, you always just ask the question, well, tell me the way, and it must be this way, and I will execute on that, and that is it. Then you will have a different form of anxiety. You won't be open to true innovation. You won't be open to curiosity and beauty. You won't be open to a life well lived. You will stagnate and limit yourself, and you will make the people around you suffer.
Yeah.
They both cause suffering. I mean, yes, suffering exists. It's always there. That's fine. But this creates a lot of suffering when you obsess about these two angles. But if you put them together and you're willing to maintain the paradox of, hey, there's one way a lot of times, meaning, for example, you need to accept that, look, if you need to lose weight, you need to do just a couple of these things and just get over it and get to work. And then also accept that there's a variety. There's multiple ways to solve a problem. To realize, oh, I hate the gym, and I just need to burn calories. And so, yes, the one way of burning calories, but I could take walks with my friends, or I could go play flag football, or I could do 20 other different things. All of a sudden, life starts to make more sense.
Mm-hmm.
But if you just commit to one, or just commit to many, you tend to struggle.
Yeah. So, there's a few ways we can take this, but I think it'll wrap around nicely. The topic of education is big for me, and it's been on my mind a lot recently, and partly that I have this sort of biased criticism of the education system as someone who was homeschooled and got certain benefits from that. And I experienced both. I went to public school in high school, but in homeschooling, I got to play a lot. I got to explore and ask questions that didn't always just have a formulaic solution. There was often the opportunity to play, to find a solution, to find a creative solution. And even in mathematics, at times I would be reading a book that my mom found that presented math through like a character stumbling upon strange situations and having to creatively find solutions. So even though I was still taught you have to memorize formulas, I was also taught someone had to come up with the formula. And you're allowed to do that too, some of the time. So I feel like I never lost my sense that education was fun and enjoyable. And I think a lot of people, because they're taught more from the frame of education is something sort of imposed on you, and it's mostly a collection of facts, a collection of information that's going to be imposed on you that you remember long enough to get approval of the system, but not ultimately enjoy. And you're talking about, really ultimately finding an enjoyable life, right? Like if you have that balance between exploration of the unknown and application of the known and the willingness to explore. It's about finding out how to live the good life, right? And education is supposed to draw forth our potential to live the good life. Um, so, as a past music teacher, I'm curious about your kind of overarching perspective, and what about your experience working with other people? Do you notice a lot of people who have had a similar path in that they've been involved in teaching or they've been involved in formal education in some way, but they're seeing this sort of shift taking place now with the internet and the creator economy and all these opportunities to sort of create a new education system? Do you sort of see that as what's happening and what you're involved with?
Oh yeah. Yeah. So at this point in my life, I'm a high performance coach and I work with some of the top performers in the world, big business owners and things like that. And, everybody's using YouTube and ChatGPT, right? I joke with my entrepreneur friends that the person who wins in business is the one who's willing to watch the most YouTube tutorials, right? Because it's like you need to set up a business and you've got some strange hardware that you've got to put together. You got to have the willingness to go, okay, this particular combination of hardware nobody else has put together ever. So I need to go pick up 5 YouTube tutorials on how all these pieces of hardware work together. And then I can do the thing. And, that's the kind of initiative that can help you move forward in life. But the strategies that people are implementing to help people learn are incredibly exciting these days. I'm very excited about the concept of AI for education. I think there's tremendous opportunities there. There's no reason for kids to be learning facts, for example, from teachers. Facts are not. It's a poor use of time for a teacher to be inputting facts into an individual. And I'll give you an example of this. When I was a music teacher, I was a music teacher for around 8 years. Much of my time was spent informing children how notes worked. That is an absolute waste of an individual's time at this point in the world. I mean, it's actually debatable whether a kid needs to learn what notes are at all these days in order to make good music. But let's say the kid does need to learn them. A music teaching program can teach how notes work way faster than any professor. It's just because it's designed flawlessly to input the information into the child's brain. But how that kid relates to that information is still up for grabs. And so many times when I was teaching, I felt very frustrated as if my time was being wasted on the unimportant stuff. Where it was, for example, a kid would be learning notes and they'd be holding their instrument wrong. And you'd have to prioritize the notes because, the whole thing falls apart if they don't know what the notes are. And it sort of creaks along if they do know what the notes are, right? And so you'd have to not be focusing on something important like how the kid is holding their instrument, which is what's going to make them capable of creating beautiful music. And you're spending time getting them to do something that just helps them get by. And so I'd rather have the computer run the program that helps them get by, and you spend your time helping them thrive. And this gets even more advanced where it's like, okay, so what's your relationship to practicing music? Can I show you how to have fun learning this stuff? Right? Can I spend less of my time getting facts into your brain and more of my time making you love this thing? Can I show you how to relax your body while you're doing this thing? And then can I be spending my time coaching you on how you're showing up at home in relation to this thing, right? All of that is stuff that teachers want to do. They know it's important, but they have a basic requirement to input the facts, right? And so this is the same with public school systems and things like that, reading, writing, and arithmetic. Reading, writing, arithmetic, that's old school, that's stuff that a computer can teach faster and better than a human. But when should you be sitting down at your desk versus when should you be spending a little bit of time with your friends versus when should you be getting a hug versus when should you be, eating good food, like functioning as a human? How are you going to learn responsibility? How are you going to learn good socialization? These are actually more useful for a teacher to be helping a child do when the input of facts at this point can be very self-directed. So I'm very excited about where learning could go if we continue to use technology to help people input facts faster.
Yeah, that is exciting. So, in your work as a high performance coach, um, what do you find are sort of the most universal struggles that you're able to help people narrow in on?
Yeah, so I like to say that I help CEOs with the same thing I used to help 9-year-olds with because the fundamentals are all the same. And so the first question when you come to me when you're falling apart is, well, are you having a sugar crash?
Yeah,
Right? That doesn't change.
right. Yeah.
I'm really good at it now, and I can speak, "Are you having a sugar crash?" in adult language rather than, "Here's some orange juice."
Yeah.
But but that still needs to be addressed. But it does get more advanced. Um, some of the top stuff that I find myself helping people with is people, like, at the basic level, a lot of elite performers bite off too big of chunks. And the reason why is because of all the self-development narratives around you need to push yourself in order to grow. And there's fundamental theories that encourage this. Vygotsky's proximal zone of development. There's all sorts of stuff that says you need to push yourself in order to grow. And we do know that discomfort is useful. But most people don't actually know the difference between discomfort and damage. It's very obvious when you're training in the gym. If you go to the gym and you work out and you overtrain, you can see the results of your overtraining. And it makes it, less possible for you to gain muscle. But when an elite performer, somebody who is, an executive, a business owner, an influencer, an artist, a content creator, a professional gamer, you're any field of white collar work, all of this stuff, it's very difficult to spot overtraining. It's very difficult to spot when you've just worked for 10 minutes longer than your brain actually can actually function, and resulted in needing to, wait 3 hours of downtime when you could have waited 20 minutes. Right? And so, I work with really ambitious people. I work with people whose greatest desire is to do the most they can. I don't work with lazy people telling them to try harder. I work with people who are doing their best on every possible level, and they only have the basic narratives and the basic tools guiding them of, like, well, let me just try harder. Let me see if I can do more. And I teach them how to do more intelligently, right? I teach them how to limit behaviors strategically in ways that they actually get more results. So I help people perform better basically by doing less, right? Do less in order to get more. Do less in order to get better results. Don't get me wrong. I love pushing people. I push myself all the time. I'm addicted to pushing myself. The point is that people who are like that also need another piece of the puzzle. And so I'm big on strategies that turn you into a high performer versus yelling at people to get them to perform more. Because I
Yeah.
found that when you are yelling at yourself to perform more, usually you perform less. If you are one of these people whose truly your greatest desire is to do the most you can. Because what that means is you are already doing the most you can, and then you yell at yourself.
Hmm.
And so it's like that was irrelevant, right? That was useless. And so I help people think more intelligently about what will get them results, and then chunk things down, and then spot the small moves that will help them achieve balance to do the things that truly create big, massive exponential impact over time.
Yeah. Well, I've heard you talk about this sort of a metaphorical distinction between capturing butterflies by uh, casting a huge net or by growing a beautiful garden. And my mind immediately went, because of what's been on my mind lately. My mind went to online creators trying to build a business and getting obsessed with certain things like needing 1 million followers, and yet losing track of the value, the actual value part. Where's the actual transaction? Where's the actual human uh you know thing happening that that doesn't require 1 million people, right? So you've talked also about building a relatively small community, and making that work, right? So
Yes, yeah, it's so that concept of you can cast a wide net or build a beautiful garden is a lot of people just get caught up in the mechanics of whatever execution they think will get them their outcome, and they just get obsessed with forcing themselves to execute on that path. And anytime they don't get results, they go, oh well, I'm bad because I just didn't execute well enough on this set of things. And I go, well, let's think a little bit more and a little bit more creatively about what would get you the outcome that you want, right? And so the uh and this is there's many ways side of life, where it's like, okay, you're trying to build this business, and inside of this business there's 5 things that you are incredible at and 2 things that you're horrific at. And if you're one of these overachieving high performers that really wants to get everything done, your first thought is probably going to be, well, I need to be better. I need to find a way to be better at these 2 things that I suck at. And I like to take the time to work with people and go, well, just hypothetically, what if you were never better at those 2 things? Yes, I know we all need to learn and grow and blah, blah. But enlightenment's a long-term game. It's kind of exhausting. Like, do you really want to make that your 2-year goal? Ascendancy? What if we just said you can't do that? What would you do? And if you ask that question, sometimes you come up with an answer. And sometimes the answer is a massive relief. Sometimes the answer is just throw those 2 steps out. The business didn't need them in the first place. Sometimes the answer is find a different way. Sometimes the answer is delegate it. A lot of this depends on what level you've achieved in your life. For a lot of business leaders, they got in the habit of taking on responsibility for things, and they need to learn how to delegate more clearly and at a higher level. For people who haven't gotten to that level, sometimes it's about being more creative. Sometimes it's about letting go of things that they can't do and being willing to create imperfectly but good. There's all sorts of different versions of it, but it's about being more committed to just making something work than making something perfect. And I found that general approach can ramp up your business, your life performance, your relationships, your sense of quality of life, your enjoyment and it can put you on a path to exponential growth, and it can put you on a path to exponential growth that few people can comprehend.
Yeah, that's super valuable. So what about, because you also talk and you write a bit, you have a little free book about how to make progress, just a short book, and in that you write a lot about desire and the role that desire actually has. Some people think that they need to like get rid of their desire or something to, and maybe that's enlightenment, but you have desires, and then you have different levels of awareness of your own desires, and then conditioned want from other people. And so what's the role of desire in, because I'm looking at this question of being motivated to do something big and significant, um, without getting burnt out. um, how do you maintain motivation, and
Yes.
how do you not need to crack the whip on yourself to get stuff done?
Yes. Yes. Perfect timing. Yeah. This it's core to this, right? Because you probably picked up on earlier when I was talking about this, like finding a different way. Oftentimes, when people have to find a different way, they have to be willing to release attachment, right? They have to, like, they have a set of goals and plan of what they're going to do, and they have to kind of let go of it a little bit in order to do that. And so it starts to beg the question, okay, what's the relationship with desire? How does one function around things that you want? And I'm actually a big proponent of desire. I'm a big fan of it. I think that people really misunderstand the Buddhist concept of desire is a contract to, what is it? Desire is a contract with yourself to be unhappy until you get what you want,
Yeah.
something like that. That is a very kind of, it's something that has a lesson within it, but it's not the full truth of what needs to be learned. And that concept is basically attached desire. When you are basically, when you make a contract to suffer and be unhappy until you get what you want, you get that outcome. But you don't have to make that contract. You can desire without having that contract, right? And so most people who struggle with, for example, having that really big goal and having the set of things that they are kind of task mastering themselves to make themselves do, but they can't let go of it because they're like, well, this is what I want. This is the thing I'm trying to achieve. They usually don't have a nuanced enough understanding of their own desires. In fact, they often are deeply out of touch with them because they usually have narratives that tell them, oh, well, my desire is bad. The things that I want aren't good, and I need to learn how to discipline myself and be better, right? And when you have those narratives, you aren't really listening to yourself. You aren't really listening to what you want on a deep level. And so I kind of flip this and I get people to get in touch with what they want. And I teach people how to learn what they want on the now level as opposed to what do you want in 10 years? Because I've found that desire is a skill set or a muscle that can be trained. And if you train that muscle, the muscle of desire, what you want becomes more intelligent over time. And so the whole like, well, you need a 10-year plan and you need to stick to it and commit to it, and that's that, is kind of the Catholic version of saying like, hey, like, all you want to do is sin, and what you need to do is really come up with the highest good and believe in it, and then everything will be okay, and ignore all those worldly desires that you have. You shame on you. There's an element of that that's useful, but people get lost in it and they get out of touch. And when they get out of touch, they get stuck in must seek goal, must be perfect, must do thing right, and that's it. Right? And so what I do is I flip that and I say, okay, well, like, what do you want now? In the next 5 minutes? Because if all it is brownies, then you're probably not super in touch with what else you want.
Hmm.
So let's wait 5 more seconds. What else do you want? let's start to discern between a desire and a craving, right? And so a craving is something that you want, and when you get it, you are less. A desire is something that you want, and when you get it, you are more. And so let's sort through these. Oh, you want cocaine and hookers. Great. Okay. Well, we know that's kind of tearing you down if you're making that a habit. So let's disregard that for a second. What else do you want? Oh, a glass of water? You'd like that? You're thirsty. You noticed. Great. Okay, let's drink a glass of water. Great. You wanted a glass of water. We got you a glass of water. And now you are satiated. You wanted something and you got what you wanted. You can get what you want. And what I'm doing here is actually a process of connection, differentiation,
Yeah.
and application to tie it back to my original concept of learning theory. Is you can coach a person on the experience of wanting stuff, where you focus in on it, and then you tap into a specific thing that you want, you go after it, you get it, then you reinforce that you got it, that it was good that you got it, and that it got you a positive outcome. And then you go, okay, what do you want next? And then you go, well, I want to repot a cactus with my bare hands. And you go, great, go ahead and do it. And then you do it, and you get spines in your hand. And now you no longer want to repot cactuses with your bare hands.
Yeah.
Like, if you want to touch a hot stove, and then you touch a hot stove, now you no longer want to touch a hot stove. Ergo, desire is trainable.
Yes.
And so give yourself reps on this on the short term, and pretty soon you're going to find yourself going, I really want to work on that project there. And you go, great, go after that project like a lion.
Mm-hmm.
Crush that project. And then come back and go, great, you crushed that project. What sort of outcome did you get? Positive, negative? You happy, proud of yourself? Kind of disappointed? Okay, let that inform you on the next project. You do this 20 times consciously, and all of a sudden you know a whole lot more about what you like to do, what you want to do, what you're good at. Because most people just go, well, I know I need to be going towards this goal. I need to be taking this action. So I'm just going to point myself towards it and try to bowl myself in that direction as many times as possible until I get there. But there's no scientific method of thought, application, observation, new thought occurring. And so I get people into a conscious loop of desire where they truly can honestly say they want something, and then they act on it and get a result, and they can observe the result of that action, and it becomes a meditation and a life practice that you build as a skill set over time. That turns into compound growth that is incredible. And so when you have that, you start to be more comfortable letting go of your attachment to things that you obviously can't do. You start to become more comfortable letting go of attachment to things that are obviously not working out, because you start to develop a compass for what it looks like when something actually is working. And I know a few practices as powerful as that.
Yeah, that's incredible. I'm gonna think about that when I'm carving a block of wood sometime, facing a bunch of inner resistance to creating something. Uh, Thinking about carving with the grain and those sorts of metaphors as well. Thinking about what do I actually want, because there's a lot of times where I feel I go in these loops where I'm living in all these things that I should be doing. There's
Yes.
this creative project I started. I should finish it. But it's because something in me wants to finish it.
Yes.
But there's all these conflicting needs and desires, and so it can be hard to get to that point. But when you're there, and you're just free of resistance, and you can go into like a flow state because you're just enjoying the thing, even if it's work. It's if it's enjoyable and you know why you want to do it, that's a good place to be.
It's one of the most powerful things that I know.
So what drives you? What and how have your desires evolved in recent years?
What drives me? Oh, I want to make money, get girls, and have an impact on the world.
An honest man. I like
Right? Like this. Don't we all?
it. Sounds about right.
We want health, wealth, relationships, and happiness. Um, at the basic level, I just want the simple things in life. Um, on a more thoughtful level, I'll say that I desire a life where I become more capable of making my creative visions come into reality over time. Thought into action. How do we? That's the essence of power. How can I grow in power over time? I believe that power is a positive and healthy and good thing. So how can I grow in power over time? And I personally have a strong desire to meet more and more interesting people over time. And I want to build a life full of laughter and love and relaxation and play and curiosity and progress and growth and competence and building. And I would like to build things that help other people do the same and that simply have a positive impact on the world. I would like to be more healthy and happy and powerful, and I would like others to be more healthy and happy and powerful. And I've found that a lot of that comes through personal growth, personal competence, personal performance. And so that's what I've made my path.
Yeah, that's a very good set of desires.
Thank you.
Sounds like yeah, sounds like a way knowing desiring those things and knowing it is a good way to do a lot of good for the world. Like people can think that desire is a negative thing, or that power is a negative thing, or persuasion is another example, influence. Um, but
If you if you accept that you want what you want, then you can work with those wants to find a way to make it have a positive impact on the world.
yeah, that sounds a lot more effective than denying that I want those things
Yes.
and then living at odds with myself, and probably living at odds with the world in a variety of ways.
Yes.
So, although most of your work is kind of with people who are very um, focused and ambitious, um, what would you have to say to people who probably a lot more of my audience consists of people who they are ambitious, but maybe they're more at the beginning of a journey of trying to figure out how to live, uh, how to create a life that they want. Um, how does someone begin to find out what they want, but also to be supported, to to find a way for life to support them in getting it?
Fundamentally, I would say do the thing that makes you want to do more things. For artists, this means create the piece of art that makes you want to create another piece of art. This is so hard to get because artists want to envision and then create the perfect thing that's in their head, and it's exhausting and draining, and it makes them sad, and it makes them disappointed, and then they want to make less things. But if you take this frame of, oh, if I made this thing, it would be cool and it's doable and easy, and when I get done, I'll probably be proud of it. Do that thing. Do that thing.
Yeah.
If you do that thing, then when you're done, you will want to do another. And so do the thing that makes you want to do another thing. Take the step that makes you capable of taking another step. If you do that, you will build momentum over time. And that is one of the most universal principles that I can give to somebody at any level. If you're in business, make the sale that makes you want to make another sale, right? Like if you are so freaked out by making a $50,000 sale, don't make it. There is an element of pushing yourself that's useful. There's lots of people that talk about the theories behind that. I could go into it, but it would take another hour. Doesn't matter. Just take the concept of what I'm saying and use it as food for thought. A lot of people reject this concept out of hand because all the narratives around push yourself. But if you just look at it at its face, it's very obvious. There is utility in doing easy stuff. There is utility in doing things that build momentum. There is utility in trying to do the possible. And so find the thing that you can do that will make your life better, that when you're done with it, you'll want to do another thing that makes your life better. And if you do that, you will build momentum.
Yeah, that's really good. That helps me out with this podcast. I want to keep doing episodes. I enjoy these conversations, and I learn every week that I do an episode. I learn all kinds of things. So making my continued education into a fun time is a real blessing. And carving blocks of wood, just a small block at a time, into something that I'm proud of or that I enjoyed making. Um, that's a big win, and I get so much joy out of simple things like that. Um, so still working on the getting financially supported part of it all. My podcast is currently sponsored by yours truly, um, but things are happening, and somehow this podcast, it's led to some cool opportunities. Getting to talk to you today being one of them, and I don't know if you've seen anywhere that I've posted, but because I haven't mentioned to you, I found myself organizing the Creator Economy Convention in Vancouver, British Columbia.
Incredible.
And it started as this kind of wild idea. And next thing I knew, Dan Coe said, yes, I'll come speak. Kieran Drew, Dan Goldfield, Brian Meyerhofer, Hussein Ibarra, a bunch of real cool people all started saying, yep, I'll come speak at this event. And I've taken some leaps. There's some, I'm kind of staking my name on it a bit. I'm staking some money on it. But whether we get a couple hundred people at this event, which would be a great success, or 600 people, which is kind of our ultimate goal, which would be a wild success, I'm going to learn an insane amount from it. And it's a bit of like I took off a big bite to chew on to organize an event like this. So I will have to think a little bit about how to delegate properly and lean on my strengths. But at the end of the day, even if this event broke even, because it is expensive to book a big venue and do all this stuff, I got to get around all these people quite a lot, and I got to create something like that probably will impact lots of people's lives. So I'm really appreciating the wisdom you're leaving me with here, because I'm going to notice this fluctuation between feeling overwhelmed with the magnitude of the task and remembering what I really desire and the way it all stacks up to be something that can be really fun and worthwhile. Um, and then to also desire to make it profitable and to make money and find other layers of this whole project that become profitable. But yeah, this was a really enlightening conversation about the nature of learning and being an effective person and overcoming overwhelm. I learned a few great things, so I'll enjoy editing this one, even getting to reflect on the things that you helped shed some light on. So
Amazing, amazing. And I'm excited for you for the event. That sounds fantastic. People should go.
thank you, Josh.
That's solid. And as a fellow past wood carver, I salute you. That's awesome. Yeah, yeah. I'm excited for you. Sounds like you're going down a good path.
Thanks so much, Josh. Really appreciate it. Yeah, I'll be continuing to be grateful for your trinkets of clarity as they pop up on my feeds. And I hope to stay in touch. Please let me know if you have any ideas for me and for what I'm up to. And
My pleasure. My pleasure. Sounds good.
great. Thanks for coming on, Josh.
Thank you for having me.
All right, you know the drill. The links are in the show notes. Go check out Josh's socials, give him a follow. And the Creator Economy Convention is June 5th to 7th, 2026. So get your early bird ticket by November 30th, 2025 at $200 off of full price. thelivinginternet.com. Click the link in the description. Please give this video a thumbs up to help share the love, and see you on the next episode.